I
Phyllis,
just hit the recording. Sorry.
okay, so hello, everybody. Welcome to the second annual Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars Virtual Teach-In. My name is Dr. Khadijah Ali Coleman, and I'm with my colleague, Dr. Cheryl Field Smith, and we are here facilitating a Q&A panel. We done just started, didn't ask nobody, did they want to do it? And so if you opt not to want to continue with this session, I'd understand, but right now we are having an impromptu, this is what happens when you have homeschooling mamas, and there's a papa in here too, getting together to collaborate. This is what we do, is that we create a class on the go. And so this right now, we're going to do a Q&A where those present can ask us questions regarding mitigating anxiety, not only in an online learning environment, but also mitigating anxiety as a homeschooling parent, moving forward with facilitating, creating curriculum, and just moving forward on your homeschooling journey. So I'd like to identify in this group those who would be willing to serve as part of our panel, our impromptu panel, so that the others can ask us questions. And I will then... You
want me to put a spotlight on them?
Exactly. That was the word I was looking for.
All right.
Those of us who are on the panel. So I definitely will be part of the panel. I'm putting Nichelle Nelson. Mama, you going to be on that panel?
Yes, she as well. I can.
Yes, with a smile. Mama Phyllis, are you going to be on this panel as well? I know you didn't ask for none of this.
I will. I'm not camera ready though. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You don't have to apologize.
That's fine.
But I'd be happy to.
I certainly would have fixed up had I known.
Right. This is the epitome of being put on the spot.
You
right?
all are fine.
Who else?
Oh, you know what? It won't
like
let me spotlight if you don't put your video on. I just learned that.
Yeah, but you can jump in. Mama
Can
Phyllis.
I pin her? Let's see if I can pin her.
I see.
You can't pin and spotlight at the same time. Sorry, I'm learning.
It's all good. Mama Arden, you just came into the house. You don't even know what's going on. So
I've been here, but just on camera. Everybody looking crazy. We cleaning up. We got
we do, right?
Whatever going on, we doing it today. I done been to a
right.
party.
Right, that's right. We gonna do this.
Take the sandwiches for my husband lunch. Like whatever we doing, I'm with it. Let's do
this
it.
This is organic.
I love that. I'm sending you hugs right now. I love it. So,
I'll be on in a minute. I'll be on in a minute. Let me get my hair.
Hey, I see a waver in the back.
Hi.
Like my little baby when she was 10. Is that a 10-year-old right there?
She just turned 8 July 2nd.
And
I love that age. The 10-year-old is in her creative zone. She's just created her logo for her hot cocoa business.
Okay, cocoa business. Wow. So, Mama Cheryl, can you pin yourself as well? You teach teachers.
I do teach teachers, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Here I am.
All right. So if folks can begin posting questions in the chat, I would like for everyone to introduce themselves, to just identify their credibility in offering advice on mitigating anxiety and anything regarding this homeschooling practice. So Mama Nichelle, if you can start, then we go to Arden, and then Cheryl and I will and Phyllis, and then Cheryl and I will end with the introductions.
Okay, I'm Nichelle Nelson. I started homeschooling in 1992. We successfully graduated our 3 children who went straight from us to Baylor University. One of them graduated with a bachelor's in history and a master's in museum studies. The next graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in film and digital media and a minor in communication studies. And the baby is a senior. And she is getting ready to do her internship at the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. in the fall. I wish that I had this starting out. I started out homeschooling where we were the only family of color. And we went through that for quite some time before we ever even, well, at least in the States, before we ever even met another Black homeschooling family in the States. Military families in Black homeschool families embraced homeschooling long before it became something in the United States. I am the founder of Warp and Weft History. We are an online history, online virtual history. I'm sorry, my dog is in a place that she should not be. Online history education. We do online virtual history classes where our students can learn in community. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Arden Santana, founder, co-founder, and executive director of Sage Academy. Sage Academy is my homeschool academy that evolved to open its laptop to whosoever around the country. And what's happening to us in this period of time allows for us to reach folks internationally at the rate we're going. So as part of my introduction, I could say I'm mitigating anxiety for those folks who are wanting to transition into homeschooling and they're fearful or unaware. And the two of the reasons I've encountered are I'm not smart enough, I'm not a teacher, or how do I do that when I still have to go to work, whether from home or actually into the office? What does that look like? So Sage Academy, I hate to say the word public because I want to remain as private and family and community oriented as possible, but extending my service as an educator as a public school educator for 20 years, beginning in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I finished in Connecticut, which is my home state, before I decided to not teach in the public school anymore, be a stay-at-home mom. And at that point, it was okay. I want to contribute financially to the household, but I want to stay with my children until they could tell me what's going on if I have to send them somewhere. So then I opened the daycare in Connecticut, New Haven, Rutabaga's Care and Learning Place, to begin the homeschooling journey for my children, which started in utero. I knew I wanted to homeschool them. At the time I found out I was going to have children. My children have had 2 years of schooling outside of me, but also intentionally chosen. I went through a divorce. I had to rediscover myself, figure out, okay, what does life look like now financially, taking care of them, taking care of me. So I opted to send them to school, and they went to an independent progressive school, also in Connecticut, for 2 years. And I'm going to share something with especially those of you who are anxious around what I can and can't do. Sometimes getting through anxiety is just accepting where our limitations are. Just knowing that it doesn't make us any less than who we are because we can't do everything. So I was an English major. So I look at words the way Dr. Stephanie looks at numbers. So I know that's not my place, so I'll outsource there. So for me, believe it or not, English major, love reading, love writing, great at it, natural inclination. I was pulled for AP, didn't pursue it, those types of things. I couldn't remember how I was taught to read. And it overwhelmed me that the notion of thinking, how do I teach my children how to read? I wasn't sure. And I chose school for me to go back to work and for them to get their literacy foundation, because I knew once my girls could read, I can do everything else. As long as they can read, they're good to go. So that was their 2 years there before we transitioned to Philadelphia predominantly. And then again, going back to the story, COVID hit. Folks are homeschooling by surprise, unintentionally, whether they wanted to or not, whether they thought it was something that was even they should do. And now they're frustrated though, because they're seeing the mediocrity of the school systems. My child is coming home with an essay that looks a hot mess how do you have A's and B's and hundreds? And what I'm seeing doesn't compare to that. The teachers are not answering the phone calls. The teachers are not checking the emails. So there's a concept my child doesn't understand, and there's no response to help them get that. So I send them to me, then they could just go and produce what they need to in school at the level they should be producing. And
that's awesome. So I'm going to pause you right there so we can have Phyllis and finish with intros. And I think where you're going is where this conversation is going to go, because I think a lot of folks that are with us now, they had that experience with COVID hitting, and it's like, now where do I go? So that was a perfect intro. So we're going to have Mama Phyllis introduce herself, then Dr. Cheryl Field-Smith, and I'm going to end up, and then we're going to start talking and accepting questions. And please, people, you can still put your questions in the chat if so we don't forget, and so that we can start conversing after the intros. So you up next, Mama Phyllis. You're muted.
Okay, hello. I apologize for my lack of camera readiness. I was cleaning house in between sessions today, and I look like it. But my introduction, I'll make it brief. I'm Phyllis Smith Asenyanbi. I've been homeschooling my son since late 2006, and he is just finishing high school, extra time because of his special needs. My background is mostly as a home educator, although during the process of home educating, I went back to school myself, got a bachelor's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages, and I teach English online. And so that's my brief introduction. My son, along with being having special needs, he also has autism, and he's also intellectually gifted. And so that's my introduction.
Wonderful. So Dr. Field-Smith's going to go next.
Okay, really quickly. I'm originally from Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm certified to teach pre-K through 8th grade in Connecticut and in Georgia. In Connecticut, I taught 1st grade, 2nd grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade. I moved to Georgia because I wanted a PhD. I had a lot of questions. I taught in inner city schools, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Then I went to Stamford, Connecticut, and then I went to Norwalk, Connecticut. And although they are in close proximity to each other, I realized the availability of resources was very different. There's a lot of inequity in urban, suburban education. I wanted to understand that. When I got to Emory University in Atlanta, I quickly learned that I didn't want to do much with policy, and got really passionate about the difference between Black parents historically. When we talk about the segregated Black schools, I sat under the feet of Vanessa Siddlewalker and learned that those were schools of excellence. And then I taught with Dr. Jackie Irvine, who is the grandmother of multicultural education, taught with her, and we were reading The Perception of Black Parents as Disinterested in Their Children's Education. And I was like, well, how do we go from being intimately involved and connected to all of a sudden we're perceived as not engaged? That doesn't make sense. And I don't know any Black people not engaged in their children, not, interested. Now, we don't have to step into school, all of that. So I got fired up about that. Did a dissertation on Black parents and their engagement, tried to replicate it, decided not to go back to the cold, to stay here in Georgia, got a professorship at the University of Georgia. I now teach elementary school teachers and middle school teachers how to teach. I also teach them if they want to become if they want to become teacher educators like me. So I'm in teacher education as well. And just very passionate about that. Economics, social studies, those are my biggest topics, and that's enough.
And you forgot to say that you are the most prolific researcher on Black homeschooling. You're the one who has most consistently been researching on that. As you shared with me, a lot of us start with our dissertations, but then if for those who stay in academia, it's usually not to focus on this work. And so when she told me that, when I met Dr. Cheryl Field-Smith, I had reached out to her after I passed my defense before I graduated. But when she told me that really stayed with me, because I did not plan for my dissertation work to be the end of the work that I do regarding Black homeschooling as a researcher or a practitioner, even as my daughter has graduated, because I really believe that this work is necessary. When we talk about parent engagement in education, I think that we look at it too separate, and we don't realize that homeschooling is really a parenting practice. And it's something that can become the norm or the comparative look when we look at education for all children, whether they are in traditional spaces or being homeschooled. For too long, we have compared the achievement of Black children to the achievement of other races, primarily white people, without taking into consideration the racial terrorism that we have encountered since we came to this country, and how that impacts every avenue of our lives. However, when we look at Black homeschoolers and their achievement in all avenues of what we call success, they always are above average when it comes to those things. So they need to be the normative. Our children need to be the normative comparison when it comes to any type of educational comparison. So that is why I am still invested in this, even as my own child has gone on and I've graduated her, and she's trying to live her life, but she don't know that I'm never letting her go. So I have homeschooled her off and on through her P through 12 experience, and she really has had it really was in response to I was fed up. I'm just tired. I'm tired of and we speak a lot of, I think that a lot of false narratives really circulate among us in terms of this idea that if our children are with Black people, that they're going to do right by them and they're going to get this type of education. But what I found in the county that I live that is predominantly Black is that was not the case when it came to schooling. And in fact, the schooling was so inept and just horrible that I pulled her out angrily. And you can actually look at the video that I did for another conference where that was very cathartic for me to put that together, because my daughter was labeled talented and gifted. And so she was able to do those standardized tests and all that crap. But that wasn't learning. And that wasn't where her passion was as a learner, as a person. And so what really just drove me to, was the idea in my county of talented and gifted is giving these children more busy work, more work to do. And I also, as an educator, my background, I have worked primarily in out of school time programs, developing programs. I've also taught community college for 10 some years. I really like developing programs. I really like working with young people. But what I found is that we just have these really toxic ideas of what academic success is, what learning is. And I'm tired of seeing the brightest and the children most excited about learning being lured outside of our community, not coming back to our community, and not believing that they can have positive learning experiences in environments that are led by Black people. And I look at homeschooling as being something that we can lead it, we can create it, and the children can find a connection between their learning experience and their living experience. And so I'm going to end there. That's who I am. Those are my beliefs. And that is what really led me to wanting to do this work with Dr. Field Smith, and why I'm so excited about it and so committed and pressed about it. I know y'all talk about me, how pressed I am, because I am pressed. And I own it. I own it. I'm pressed. I know people have probably used the B word in relating to me, and y'all have seen me cuss out a person or two in our Facebook group, because folks will not come into our environment. Cheryl, I didn't really cuss. I didn't use profanity.
I was gonna say, I didn't see all that.
No,
I don't cuss. I don't cuss people out on that group. others
Oh,
maybe. But
oh,
I am very protective of our community.
yeah.
I'm very
I
protective of it.
appreciate that too.
And I just want to say, I loved when she transitioned. She took off Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars and changed it to Khadijah Ali Moon Coleman. So you could know these are not
yeah.
of the organization.
Whenever that happens, I'm like, oh, I think of Cheryl. I'm like, because I don't want anyone coming for her, and I don't want anyone believing that she's the one that's saying this. So I am mindful of that because that's our brand, and so I have to say that this is coming from me. But when folks don't want to identify as Black people, but then you want to benefit from the things that we are creating collectively, that's a problem for me. That's a problem. That is a problem for me. So I say all of that to say, hello, everybody. So do we have questions? No one has a question.
Well, I want to add to the conversation. I'm sorry for interrupting, but you made such a good point about, with your experience, how you left the institution like angrily or, upset about what's going on. And that's what led to me being part of this tribe. I feel like this group is my tribe. Everyone here has been so supportive. You have no idea because I'm around a lot of people who are frustrated in my community about homeschooling, but don't know how to approach it or how to transition. And so I am being a support to them through this family. So thank you so much for that. But with my daughter,
identify yourself. Who's speaking? Oh, this is Miss Amelia.
Amelia, yes. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so y'all can see me. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
So in my community, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so my daughter was referred to a prominent, if you will, autism preschool that she was recommended to, and it was to assist her in the ways that she needed to be assisted in her schooling, and she had so many issues, and it was just a very detriment to children who are on the spectrum and have ADHD because they're very talented in education as well. And her skills was not being fostered in that way. And once I pulled her out, it was really a knee-jerk reaction. And when I took her out of that program, I was really left alone as to what do I do now? Because I refused to put her back into that school, but then I did not want her in public schooling. So then my family and friends are looking at me like, okay, what are you going to do? I said, I can do this myself. I can teach her. I can, foster these skills that I know that she has and do it on my own. And I was alone for that first year of trying to figure it out and doing all the research that I could. And again, that's where the anxiety comes in because I'm like, I now have to prove to people, in a sense, like I can do this. Then I have to prove to myself, and then I don't want to be a failure to my child. So it's like all these things are just kind of surfacing. And so that's year one. And then year two of me doing homeschooling, I was invited to attend the speak-in through Nakanda Frank. And she's been such a aid. I mean, she's amazing. So we spoke and communicated online. And once I attended last year, I literally was so filled with confidence and just, I had so much energy where I'm like, I can do this. And that's why I feel like, having these impromptu Q&As, if you will, and sharing our stories is so essential because even though we don't talk about it as much, being able to observe, being able to participate, that's how we can help each other. So I just want to thank you all for just being that support, being my tribe.
Wow. Oh, well, we thank you because first of all, no one asked Miss Amelia to do those synopsis posts that she does in the group chat of each session that she attends. And I appreciate you immensely. You are engaged, and not just here in the teaching, but also in our Facebook group. So I extend to you my sincere thanks for being part of our community. You are a valued member.
Yes.
And that is what that's my want, is for people to be engaged where no one has to ask you, because you own this, because this is ours. But I want to speak to that, Amelia, because I had the opposite experience, because everyone already thought I was not necessarily crazy, but weird, different, but smart. I have grown up with people. I remember when I was in 7th grade, this little boy was talking to me in the hallway, and someone passed and they said, "Ooh, Vondell, is that you? Is that you?" And he was in, and so I didn't know if they were making fun of him for talking to me, but he was like, "So what? At least she's smart." I was like, "Wait a minute, are you dissing me?" But that is like representative of folks. And I wasn't always, did not excel in every academic area, but I tried. And so when I said that I was going to homeschool, folks weren't scared for my daughter, but I was scared for her, because I wanted her to have opportunities. And I heard one of you all say that, because we still have in our mind what success looks like based on what was taught to us. So we want her to have the choice to go to college. If she don't want to go, that's one thing, but we don't want to jack her up academically where she can't even go if she wanted, right? And we want to be able to give them opportunities that we believe that the schools are going to give them, even knowing that we've pulled them from these very schools because of the toxic experiences that our children have had regarding learning. And so while no one really shamed me regarding homeschooling, I was very anxious about it, because while I've helped other people's children be successful, and more so in ways regarding their identity and believing in themselves and things like that, because all of us have different skill sets. All of us have strengths that may not be what is centered in learning environments. And I think that may be one of my gifts, is to identify that and have a child lead with that to demonstrate their understanding of whatever it is that we're going through. But I really had such anxiety around not jacking my child up. And one of the things that really helped me was understanding the environment in which I was taking her out of, and understanding that whatever I could provide to counteract that and to focus on nurturing was always going to be better. And that being with me and being because she's my child, and I know her better than anyone. I should, right? And what I learned is that there were a lot of things that I didn't know, because they're in those schools for most of the day. And so a lot of our early practice just revolved around learning about each other in ways that learning is going to be naturally be integrated. But that anxiety that we talk about is what stops us from being comfortable in that not doing. I am the queen of, I can do 5. People say multitasking is not a thing, and I say you a damn lie, because I literally, that's how my mind works. I have to be busy, and I think it's because I have anxiety. I'm a busy person. That's a sign of anxiety. When you are worried about what it comes in the future, that's anxiety. When you're dwelling in the past and depressed about the past, that's depression. And so I am the queen of, and that has a lot to do with how I was raised. I was raised where I had to be doing something, or I was not, I would get in trouble for reading, because you have to sit to read. And so it looked like I wasn't doing anything because I was reading. I love to read, but so all of those things require, getting to know your child requires getting to know them, not making them do something, not assigning them something, not telling them that if they're playing, that is not valuable. When we know that play, children learn so much from play. Arden, if I had known you before, when you said that you didn't know how you learned how to read, I would tell you that you probably learned because you probably read the same damn book 50 million times, because that's how my daughter learned how to read. One day she couldn't read. She read the same damn book for months and then said, "Hey, mommy, let me read this to you." And I said, "Okay." And she read the whole book. I was like, "That's great," because I thought she had memorized it. Then she picked up another book and started reading to me. I had nothing to do with that in terms of there was no lesson plan that I can tell any of you that I used to teach this child how to read. And so
We
that,
call that hyperlexia. There's a word for it. Literally,
oh,
I was
really? I didn't know that. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I mean, there are children who are hyperlexic, just like there are children who are dyslexic. I was
Mhm.
hyperlexic. I mean, I could read when I was like 3. I mean, it
Right.
was like my
I have
father would
two.
read to
I
me.
have two like that.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
father would read to me on occasion, and I would think, oh, that's really cool. He tells me these stories out of books. I wish I could read like that. And one day I had asked him to read or something, and he was too busy, and I picked up a book and I realized I could read.
Mhm.
And so after that, I just was reading, like all my siblings were in school. They were bringing home their books and I was reading them. They're like, who taught you how to read? I don't
Well,
know.
and Dr. Shell can confirm this, that children of homeschool parents tend to be more verbal or have higher
Yes.
their ability to read and
Absolutely.
Yes.
converse and things like that, which I always
That's
find to be
true.
so funny that's what the research says, because they always worried about our kids being social, right?
But
Right.
we
Yeah,
are,
that's
but you know,
Right.
true.
you all, by homeschooling, you are immersing them in a literature rich environment,
Yes.
the home.
Yes.
And when you think about what happens at school, I mean, it was a disaster for my daughter because she must have been the hyperlexic, as you say, Phyllis, because my daughter went to school reading, but then they want you to do
Right.
and my
Right.
daughter's sitting up here like,
Yes.
okay, move on, because I know
Right.
that cat. Give me something I
Right.
don't know. You know,
It's
and
very boring when you
it
go to a school.
is.
Right.
You gotta
Right.
It
sit there.
is.
They're saying
I
A for apple and B for ball, right?
That's it.
And
That's it.
I
you're
had
And
to
like,
then
I
write
and
this
then
know
word
the
down.
moment.
my son was the opposite. He couldn't break down that phonics. Me reading to him, that didn't help to make him an independent reader. It wasn't until he had Betsy for a teacher in 3rd grade, and all of a sudden these comic books are going to school, and I'm like, you can't bring no comic book to school. And he's telling me, Betsy, this teacher let the children call her by the first name. She was loosey goosey. She had a rabbit running around her classroom. It was just like, I thought it was going to be a wasted year. So when I walked him to the classroom to make sure it was okay that he brought these comic books, she condescendingly talked to me and said, Mama, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Yes, he can. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a wasted year. Anyhow, then he starts bringing these coffee table books to school. He loved, airplanes and stuff. And I would buy the big books he couldn't read them. They were the pictures. I'm kid you not. Then all of a sudden this child is reading novels.
There you go.
Betsy taught me to let it go.
Yes.
You gotta
Yes.
give your kids what they want to read. And children learn to read by reading, period.
Yeah,
Right.
her classroom
Right.
sounds like a homeschooler's house
It
with the
Yeah.
rabbit. You
was.
said a
Yeah.
rabbit
It
running
Yeah.
around.
Right.
Or
Right.
that was the type of classroom my daughter, the
Yeah.
independent school I sent them to. First name, very child led, very similar experience.
Yeah, I think I love these stories because this proves that traditional school spaces don't have to be traditional. And when and it sounds like even when we had the session on folks creating their co-ops and their independent schools, it's the practice. So it's not traditional schools themselves that have these negative experiences that have led some of us to homeschool. It's the practice, what is happening within these schools. And I love that story, Cheryl. And I love what you're doing, Arden. Matthew Rankin has a question. He says, excellent
powerful
discussion.
question. There's a powerful
Your insights have prompted me to consider the following question. In light of the widely known detrimental effects of traditional schooling for Black students, to what degree do we as homeschoolers or aspiring homeschoolers carry a responsibility to broaden the Black homeschooling community? For example, spread the message. Is this something we should see as a communal responsibility? Ooh, I didn't expect that question.
I do.
I love
I
that
absolutely
question.
do. I just in relating to some of the things that you were saying, Dr. Khadijah, I was brought up in AP classes, honors classes. I grew up in Colorado Springs in a military community, which was very, very multicultural community. But in my memory, I know that I was the only African American in any of my honors classes. Mm-hmm. And so this filtering process that taught the other African Americans in the school, I was always ostracized because, oh, look, she's carrying books. I did not feel a part of that community because I was separated from the herd, because we were taught that only a very few of you have this gift. Only a very few of you are above intelligent. And 30 years, fast forward 30 years later, when I went back to school, I was in an honors government class in Austin Community College, which is a very multicultural learning environment. And we were discussing Brown v. Board, and I shared that with them. And I looked around the room. I said, and here, 35 years later, I'm still the only African American in the room. It is absolutely essential that we encourage other Black and Brown homeschool parents that, yes, you can. This is not, we're not a fluke. We're not an exception. This, and which is what I tell people all the time. No, we weren't the exception. We were the rule, because the other Black and Brown homeschool families that we know were just as successful. Their children are doing great things. I'm older than many of you, but I could definitely relate to also the what Amelia was saying, that early anxiety, that fear of being embarrassed if our children don't know at a certain grade what other children know at a certain grade. Let them learn it on their own. I remember having a sister-in-law come and visit and try to do a pop quiz on my children about the 3 branches of government. Well, we weren't at that place at that particular moment in time. And I had to encourage my children, don't worry about that. You will learn it when you learn it, when you need to learn it. And so definitely, back to answering your question, I absolutely believe that we need to be intentional about our encouraging, particularly when we meet people in the grocery store and they're telling us how bad their schools are and how their children are being treated. They don't have to stay there. There are ways, there are means. So.
Yes.
Right. And those are conversations that I actually have had. Thank you, Ms. Michelle, for bringing that up, where if people are disliking their current situation in the public school system, in my city, I'm in Milwaukee, so with MPS, I naturally had those conversations that, hey, I've been homeschooling my daughter for 2 years now, and this is the experience that I've had with her. She's enjoying her homeschooling life, and, I'll give them my contact information if they want it, but I feel open enough to do it. I think it is essentially, I think our duty. I want to just amp it up because I really feel like it's essential in the Black community to have another option outside of public schooling for our children. I've spoken with families who have their children here who are first generation Americans, where they're from different countries, and they still educate their children outside of school. We tend to not do that for whatever reason. Culturally in the Black community, it's like we tend to keep it to where public school systems are the main source. And we need to own that and take that back and make education in the household essential. So we definitely should and need to just spread the message. Like, if you don't know, ask. And we're able to kind of help you do that. So to answer that question, I totally agree. We should make it a priority.
Yes, I'd like to respond to that question also. Even from the very beginning, when I started homeschooling my son in a very isolated situation, I always felt the need to tell others about homeschooling. At first, I had like a fear almost of like, okay, if we go to the grocery store during the day, people are going to be like looking and wondering, why doesn't she have that boy in school? And, I did have some people ask me that, and I would say, I homeschool my son. Some people would look at me like, yeah, right. Especially when they would look and they didn't see a ring on my finger, okay? Because I'm a solo, I was a divorced solo parent. And I would they might ask me a few questions about homeschooling. And I would respond, and I felt the need to spread the word. And I'm still spreading the word. Kendra and I do that clubhouse room. We're doing it every Wednesday now at 10 a.m. And my hope is to bring in people who are not just homeschoolers, but people who are curious about homeschooling. So, we decided that we're probably going to do some Q&A type of rooms, different things to let people know that there is an alternative. Because a lot of people, especially younger people, which I run into on Clubhouse, and I'm older, I'm sure probably than everybody here. I'm 61 years old. And, they'll be talking about divesting from the public school system. But then sometimes if you talk to them about homeschooling, they're like, well, I can't do it. The different reasons that they can't do it. I'm just a firm believer that if you really want to do it, you can find a way to do it. And I want to not just say that to people, but explain to them how, because a lot of people really feel like they cannot do it. There are people who want to, but feel like they can't. Well, I and my husband both have to work. How can we homeschool? And let them know there are people who work and homeschool, married couples. Some work one shift, some work another. You can do school outside of traditional school hours, homeschooling outside of traditional school hours. So I think it's essential that we spread the word because of what's happening in the schools, what's happening to our children, the effect that it's having on their self-esteem, their confidence, all of that. And so people send children to these schools and expect them to be able to somehow come out unscathed. But a lot of times they are scarred from those experiences. So, we have to present that alternative.
Yes, I agree 100%. Matthew, that's why I do what I do. I want to get these stories documented and published and out for everybody. And I'm glad that we are now positioned to get them on the kitchen table of Black families too. That's important. I want to talk about Mashawn. Did I pronounce it right? Mashawn?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Mashawn wrote, I am motivated to homeschool, but the home space is not there yet. How do you create a homeschool space in an extended family household where it may not be supported and respected? I want to first tell you, Mashawn, you are not alone. I recently did a study on rural Black homeschooling, where I interviewed some people who are Black home educators and they live in rural areas. And one of the mothers had to move home with her parents. It's not where she wants to be, but that's
because of COVID-19. Yeah, I'm here because of COVID-19, family emergency.
Okay, she's in the same place, and her parents do not want her to homeschool. And she had to put one of her child who was school age in school in order to be able to go home. And she's homeschooling the little one, who is a preschooler and doesn't have to go to school, but she feels the same pressure. So I first want you to know you're not alone. And in the DC, you're in DC, and your child is 13, right?
Right.
And from what I know, the little bit that I know, you are in a really great space for homeschooling. There are Black home educators all around you. And I'm wondering, those of you that if you've experienced this, but if you're living in the household with the people that are against you doing this, how do you still do for your child what you think is the right thing to do? How do you, like, what I'm thinking, I mean, I'm imagining if it was me, one of the things I'd like to do is just hear my parents out, if it's my parents. What are your fears? What do you not trust that I'm going to do the best for my child? I would start there, but I'm assuming you may have done that already, Michonne.
Yeah, just a little bit about me real quick. Yeah, I grew up from Newport News, Virginia, where I live on the same street with my family. I was raised by my extended family, so I had that co-op experience growing up. I went to a co-op school when my daughter was first born. Went to a co-op preschool because I've always been ready to homeschool. But then, even in my marriage, my husband was not supportive of doing that. We're separating now. So it's starting with my partner is not supporting that. And so due to the pandemic, we had a family emergency. I moved to DC from Seattle with my family here, helping out with my mother and my sister. And so, although, my siblings grew up in that environment where, hey, look, our family was like they're all educators, home economic teachers that taught us about home economics. Mm-hmm. I say, do you understand why I want to do this? And they saw the virtual learning experience through the COVID-19, saw how my daughter she's on IEP, she went from like failing grades because of the transition from Seattle, DC to straight A student just through virtual learning. And so I said, do you see the difference? And I was so happy I was happy to see that. So it was told me I could do it because of course I've always been kind of homeschooling or doing her own thing, but I was so glad to see that she could, excel in that way. So,
right. Are you having, Michonne, are they saying things to you or asking questions about homeschooling? Are they castigating you and saying that it's stupid?
Yeah, well, see, I'm just in their space right now because I'm we're in a family emergency, so I'm here helping my mother, my sister who's ill. So, and school is starting in less than a month. So she's in a DC public school right now, but I want to continue virtual learning. DC is not allowing that unless you have a medical emergency, which hers did not qualify. She has epilepsy and she's on an IEP for ASD, but it's not qualified for the virtual school emergency. So I'm looking at the K-12 option for virtual learning because I want her to continue virtual learning. With that, you partner with a charter school. She can do her core courses online virtually, and then socialization through sports and extracurricular activities. So I just been talking to them. I haven't decided yet. Yeah. So this is where I am in terms of that. Yeah.
Michelle,
so I want to say one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nichelle. I want to say that is awesome that you are considering disconnecting from the school system if you're finding that there's value in her not being in that space and she's excelling academically. I do want to encourage you to take a look step back for a little bit and try to assess why it is that she is excelling. Is it the virtual learning experience? Is it being home with you? Is it her ability to have breaks? Do you all do other things in addition to her being on the computer, like take trips and things like that? Because all of that stuff matters. And what you'll find is that a small portion of it may have to do with her being on a computer, because I don't think that is what children are right. excited about. I think a lot of it has to do with being around her mom, being in an environment where she is able to self-pace. Yeah. And that's actually the feedback that I got through my dissertation study, where children were saying all the things that you all have said already with the reading. The school's too slow. I can self-pace if I need to spend more time on something. So what I say all of that to say is, don't be so quick to find something to replace a traditional school setting. If you're going to make the decision to disconnect, find a way that you can develop for yourself or for your child a program pulling from different elements. As was said, I live in Prince George's County, so I'm very close to you. Sankofa Homeschool Collective is probably one of the most nationally and globally recognized Black homeschooling collectives that we have that's near you. But there are also other spaces that you could find and connect, where co-ops typically have classes for a day. And then, the child can work on the things they've learned there, but homeschooling allows so much learning to take place, that more so than in a traditional school setting. So I just want to put that out there before you because that's a lot of what this anxiety also tends to make us do, is that we begin to replace this traditional school setting with another traditional
I know,
pattern.
yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I
Can
just
I,
want to say that to you. And I know Nichelle has some other advice to follow up. But can I also say that we have now passed the threshold of an hour. Right now, the coffee talk by our dear Amelia Peace is taking place. It's pre-recorded, so you will be able to see that at your leisure. So we have decided that we will keep this conversation going until our next speaker live presentation, which is at 5 o'clock. Okay. So I just wanted to say that, and Nichelle can jump in and respond.
I just wanted to, I don't know what your living situation is like, but I wanted to say from my own experience that with extended family, it is necessary to establish some healthy boundaries. That you may be living in their space, but this is your child. And ultimately, you are responsible for that child's education, however you choose to approach that. And so from my personal experience, I had to have some hard conversations about with extended family members. And I understand that they had some fears, they had some concerns. They were accustomed to a traditional model. And so they couldn't get on board, but I had to let them know I was okay with them not getting on board, because these were our children, and this was our goals in our homeschool journey. So for me, like I said, establishing healthy boundaries with extended family is sometimes essential.
If I can say too, this
Thank
does
you.
link up with what George put also in the chat about the idea of having a supplemental Saturday school. It also links up with getting the word out that this is a viable, preferable option. We're in the era of school choice, so we should be evaluating all of our options and not shutting down the idea of homeschooling. Let's take a look at what the possibilities are for Black children. The more research we get out there, you can see that the children are thriving in this environment. So absolutely, absolutely. Let's see, San Lewis, I see your hand up.
Yes, I have a question. It was regarding more so along the lines of like deschooling. I have 4 children. One is 6, she's going to 1st grade. A 5-year-old, he's going to K5. A 3-year-old, she's going to K4, and then 2-year-old, he's not in school yet. So the 3 oldest ones are in a Montessori program right now, and I'm considering homeschooling them. So I'm trying to determine if or what a good recommendation be to like take some time off to kind of help the transition better, or just kind of go right into homeschooling.
Yeah. What do you all think?
So I can chime in on that. I will say from my experience, I did not do a transition. I regret not doing a transition because I didn't really have, in my mind, I had ideas in place, what I wanted to do with my child, but putting it into practice did not work out so well that first year. And then to piggyback off of the previous anxiety of doing it while you're with family members who were not supportive was not helpful at all. So my suggestion would wholeheartedly be to do a transition first, just to on your own time, to see how your children, feel comfortable with kind of homeschooling. So if you do 1 or 2 days out of the week of, setting that time to kind of see how they feel with certain activities and so forth, and then work your way. to that deschooling or unschooling method, if you so choose. I would definitely recommend that.
I would agree secondarily. As a recovering public school teacher, homeschooler, I had to. The unschooling was more for me than it was my daughters, I think, because I had to switch my mind from my training as a public school teacher. So I essentially started, doing school at home as opposed to homeschooling. I was, still in terms of my curriculum, lesson planning and this time and this structure and let's be here and let's do this. And I'm saying, no, this is counterintuitive. Um, so yes, take that time, and in that time, what you're doing is you're just letting your children be, listening to them, watching them, observing them, looking at what their interests are, what they're into, and figuring out how can we turn that into learning experiences, how can we turn that into potential entrepreneurship experiences, how can we connect, like my daughters were into LOL dolls. I think they're the stupidest things, got on my nerves so bad, they loved them, and I'm just saying, do you realize how much money these people are making from this thing? Let's look at this and figure out how you might be able to create your own doll, or so just looking at what they're interested in. And I'm guilty because I need to tap into that inner child, so playing for me, especially with dolls, is not an easy thing. Two daughters, the God is so funny. But so just taking the time to just look and learn your child to figure out what the next year or two might be for you in terms of homeschooling. I also wanted to speak to these knee-jerk, to use Amelia's words, and Khadijah, who out of anger, they're not necessarily like, we could begin to think about it as these are intuitive. We're mamas, we're women, we are intuitive, and our intuition is telling us what our children need. So we have to listen to that, and find our tribe. I put it in, in the comments in terms of the community question. It is. Education is just as political as economics and vaccinations and everything else is going on. Education is political, and especially when we're talking about educating Black children, African American children, people of color, whatever we want to call them. That is extremely political and scary right now. Because we're the very people who, why did we risk our life to learn how to read? I asked the whys, and that's another practice in my school. Let's ask the why, answer the why, so yes. The Saturday activity, continue to follow, the storefront here, Sage Academy. Our program, it looks to answer the questions that parents have about what does that look like if I have to work. I actually piggybacking off Phyllis, where her fear was the questions in the grocery store. My fear is short of getting on whatever platform I have and saying, pull them out those schools and take them out, and that's what I want to say, pull them. And I do believe on one of somewhere on the website, I say that, pull them, they're safe with Sage. Because if we are online and you're at work, home, you have your tribe, Sage is a 4-hour minimum program, 4 days a week. Your child is on camera, they're with me. If there's an issue, I could call you and say, check in, Johnny's camera been off too long. Where there's a will, there's a way. Yeah. So those in consideration, it looks, your homeschool experience is what you create, is what you make it. It has to be, there's no choice for it to be what your family needs. So you outsource where you need to outsource. Sage only goes Monday through Thursday. So we're leaving Fridays open for enrichment activities. What do the parents need? We're educating, we're lifelong learners. So there are parents who don't understand civic engagement. There are parents who aren't. So there's a class for you. What enrichment do we need? Do we want Afrocentric history on Saturdays or Fridays? We can do that. Whatever it is that we need as a community, we can create it.
Oh, I love that.
May I respond also? I'm doing this on my phone, so I can't see like the whole computer view.
Okay.
Because this was impromptu. But I would like to say that homeschooling has changed so much over the years. I would say in the early part of the century, a lot of Black homeschoolers were following like that white Christian evangelical model of homeschooling. I mean, even when I started, I would spread the word about homeschooling, but for me, my homeschool within my home was a very individualistic thing. And what I like so much now is that there's more of a collectivism around homeschooling, and Black homeschoolers connecting with each other instead of trying to go into these spaces where they didn't want us and we were marginalized anyway, including co-ops and support groups and all of that. I mean, things have changed so much within, I'd say, even the last 8 years. So, it's not like you have to do this thing alone. I mean, there are all these classes out here. There are people teaching on OutSchool. There are people who have schools, enrichment programs, and all of this is some of it is in person, some of it is virtual, but you definitely would have more of the feeling of being in a village. Whereas when I started, I just felt like extremely isolated, like it was me against, almost like against the world, but yet I'm going to do this thing because I see that this system that my son was in, he was not going to thrive. And my big concern was him not becoming a statistic.
Yeah.
Because of what he was experiencing in the school system. But I mean, there's just so many resources out there for you. You don't have to do it alone. Things that you don't know, you can tap into other people's wisdom. There's the collectivism here, and I love it. And people are just so willing to share.
I love that too.
Can I ask, Phyllis, were you a part of Focus? Yahoo group called Focus?
Yes, I was a part of Focus, and
I remember
Focus was literally a lifeline. It was one of my lifelines because
mine. Yeah.
a lot of places where I would go with my son, especially when he had a lot of behaviors that were not that had to be addressed over the years, they just didn't want us there.
Right.
There was no. There wasn't a lot of in-person places where we could go. And so Focus was one of my online lifelines. Yes.
Absolutely. Same here. Focus was an early homeschool tribe. And literally Focus was a part of my life around the time that we lost our daughter. It was Focus that prayed and prayed with us and just like walked with us through our grief process. So I thought I recognized your name from Focus.
Yeah, I saw yours. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Focus stood for Families of Color Utilizing Homeschooling.
That sounds like an article in the making of the early. Well, because that's what we need is for folks to know that this is not new and that we've been doing this. And I would love for you all to work on something talking about your early experiences before, because you mentioned Yahoo. I remember when Sankofa started as was an early Yahoo group before it became the mega collective that it is. It is, I think they still have their Yahoo group, but Yahoo, remember those? Well, I'm sure you do. You're talking about Focus, but that's the way that folks were able to use this virtual space as a landline to connect with others. So I would love for you two and others that are listening or a part of our community to really talk about because you're our elders in this, and you're teaching us that this is not new and that the practice is only evolving.
African American single parent homeschoolers was a Yahoo list. Actually, it was, and then it disappeared, and then Tishaona, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Chinyelu, ended up reviving it, putting it on Facebook. And I became an active member of African American single parent homeschoolers on Facebook. And then she turned the group over to me to admin. So, I mean, we've been getting together for years. A lot of it was online. Back then I didn't think that I had the, I don't know, the skills or the ability to start a co-op or support group, which now I realize I probably did, but I just didn't know anyone else who was doing it. I didn't know who to go to ask, how do you do this? Or, but now I'm just so happy to see that this is just like commonplace, all these people interacting and helping people and sharing knowledge. And I did not find that in the white homeschooling community. I just did not. I mean, even online, sometimes you would go into a group and you would ask a question or something. This is after even groups initially started on Facebook. And if it was a predominantly white group, no one told you you couldn't join the group, but sometimes no one would respond to you.
Oh yeah,
Right.
that still happens.
Or-
That still happens.
I was
That's-
rebuked
Yeah, it still
for
happens.
starting in Africa. I started Christian Minority Homeschoolers of Austin and put it out there in the predominantly white groups and had people question, why are you starting a separate group? Not
Mhm.
understanding that Black homeschoolers have our own unique challenges, and they just could not understand that.
So look, I get that every time I do a paid ad for anything that we do, folks are always up on the comment section telling you're being divisive and all this crap, whatever. But
I get it at talks, believe it or not.
yeah, I can imagine.
They push
I have the same issues where the first year of me looking for information, I was in a Facebook group. It was literally myself and maybe two other Black moms, where it was a predominantly white group of homeschoolers. And I remember I was just observing, because I observed first to kind of see the mood of the group and stuff. And I had one mom ask a question that it was a common question that people ask, and you would get crickets. If you were to have the sound or no sound, no one responded to her. And I just thought, I was really like shocked, because I'm thinking, at this point, we should be past this, where we want to just choose and pick on how we want to communicate. I'm like, but we're not. And that was very surprising to me. So I'm like, okay, let me step away. And like I said before, it was really once I stepped away and kind of observed a little bit more, I found out about our group here. And it's just been such a blessing to be a part of this community. But prior to that, I can only imagine at the time that mother kind of feeling lost and like, okay, I'm not even getting a response. Like, this is so ridiculous. So I can relate.
Did you all address George's comment? I had to step away because
We talked about it, but not thoroughly, about the Saturday program.
Oh, okay.
Which one?
So George be on it, right?
Yes,
but
he does.
But have we talked at all about African-centered education in general? I know that when we even talk about Black homeschooling, what Cheryl and I all often lead with is that we are not a monolith. And so many of us emphasize different things within our homeschooling practice. And when we talk about this idea of African-centered education, or you might hear Pan-African, or just really from a perspective that it's recognizing the global connection of people of African descent. Has that ever been something that has been hard for you to even approach in part of your homeschooling practice? What role does that play in your homeschooling practice? Is there a responsibility? I guess I'm copying after Matthew's question in terms of this idea of responsibility that we have as home educators. Is it our responsibility to lead with that, or make that predominant in the way that, in the practice, or the topics that we discuss with our children?
I can answer that. So for my daughter, she's 5, as I mentioned before. And really from the time she started talking, Afrocentric themes of any subject has been a predominantly focus in my education with her. So I feel as a Black woman, that's something I need to instill with her, because that was something that was missing in my education growing up. And that's definitely a detriment, I feel. with how my education has went. So I definitely do not want her to fall through the cracks, I guess, if you would say, with that. So I think it's to each of their own type of thing. Again, everyone homeschooled differently. For me, that's just been a focus. So every time I've introduced a subject, even when we do things that are virtually through her tablet and so forth, it's first with African American faces, teaching her these things and with books and all that stuff. And if she's showing an interest where she wants to inquire more outside of Black studies, I definitely introduce that to her as well. But I do focus primarily on Black studies with her in all her studies.
Yeah, I wanted to thanks for that question. To just refer people in the Kaya Green Ubuntu Village, who was one of the panelists in the panel I moderated. Her school is unapologetically Afrocentric, and I believe she offers a Saturday intensive around. I'm not sure what topic areas, but you might want to refer to that information as well.
I remember I
Okay, go
remember places like Kamali Academy were the only place that folks can go, and I like to see that it's broadening the options that folks have with having African centered curriculum and classes that they can pull from. But what were you going to say, Phyllis?
I was going to say, in my homeschool, it was more of an evolution, because when I started homeschooling, I don't know, it was like, a whole new world opened up to me. I always liked to read and study, but hadn't for many years because of, having a child, being a single parent, etc., just being so involved with the day-to-day living. But, at first that wasn't a huge emphasis, although I had always taught my son on a personal level about who he was, where he was from, where his father was from, the continent, and that made him ask me all these questions, well, tell me more about the Euro people, did we come from here or did we come from there? You know what I mean? He just like had all these direct questions that caused me to have to read and study. And over the years, it became more and more of an emphasis in our homeschool. But to be honest, it didn't start off that way. I just had, I don't know, I had that colonized education, and I had not, I had not decolonized my own mind.
Right. It wasn't until I went back, I intentionally went to, when I went back to school, went to an HBCU to get my history degree, because I knew I had gaps. Absolutely. I remember first learning about Ida B. Wells with my daughters and just being floored that I had never, ever heard of her.
Wow.
So there have been many. I mean, I sat in my, Dr. Francis was my professor at Houston-Tillotson University. And I mean, I'm just sitting there with my mouth open, because these are things that I had never heard. So I wouldn't say that I lead with it, but I do definitely, a lot of us, and I heard this even in another panel where someone asked about a question about gaps. We all have gaps.
Yep.
And homeschooling is such a great opportunity to learn alongside your child.
Yes. That's what I was actually going to pull out from your comment, is that is essentially, I think, the biggest nugget that can be pulled from this is that we do not have all the answers, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But you can develop an idea of the direction that you would like your child to go. One of the things that I do find valuable in traditional learning spaces from a teaching perspective is the idea of intended outcomes. I love that. And when I was first introduced that in my 20s, in my education program, I love the idea of intended outcomes, because what that means is that after a child does X, Y, Z, what are they able to demonstrate? What is it that we are expecting them to be able to do at the end? So it focuses on them. It's not what your goals are. It's what will they be what will they gather and what would be of value to them that they will be able to do XYZ. And when you look and when you plan and do things from that perspective, you start to realize that there are so many different strategies that open up for you to engage children in experiences where they'll be able to do that. And very few of them are focused on just lecturing to them or telling them to go take some tests or just go and do some book and writing exercise. It usually is something that's comprehensive, or it's something really kinesthetic and interactive. And I know that I grew up, my parents were Pan-African when I was born. I went to Watoto Shule, Nation House Watoto Shule in DC for a couple of years. My mother, when I went to the library, I had to get books, Black people, to send me back if it didn't have nothing about Black people. And so I that was part of my learning experience growing up. But you get very indoctrinated in spaces where you're not centered to really look at things where as an outsider, as a viewer, as opposed to being part of it. And that's really when we talk about African-centered learning, it's not necessarily only looking at things about Black people, but looking at things where you are a participant in it rather than just an onlooker or viewer. I can say with my daughter that I homeschool with a liberation in mind, but like some of her favorite writers, oh my goodness, George, help me out. What Garcia, he's Colombian. He's basically the father of magical realism, which is a genre of literature. She loves that. She loves that in literature. She loves that in film. And that's what she wants to go on. She's going to school to study English and film, and she wants to create that, but she wants to center Black people. So she learned about this this genre that really was born from Latin American culture in literature, but now how can I apply this to my community? And so when we are thinking African-centered, when we're thinking of the ways that we are teaching our children, where we're centering their experience, it's really, we're teaching them how to look at things where they have some engagement with it. It's not outside of them. And that's when we talk about possibilities, that a white person, a Latin American, a Native American person may have done this, but this isn't outside of the stratosphere that doesn't relate to us. And I don't know how to explain it any better than that, but intended outcomes really has helped me with my practice, more so of looking at it as African-centered. What are these outcomes where she's going to be able to demonstrate that how this information applies to her community and the world globally. Does that make sense? That was a lot.
It makes sense. It does.
Right. And then just to add, sorry, well, what you were saying, you can always start off locally as far as African American history, because in my city of Milwaukee, we have so much that I've learned over the years. So I tend to kind of piggyback off of, when I do want to branch a little bit more with my daughter on African American or Black history, I tend to pull really from my community. And then I like kind of show her pictures and things that she's doing. If it's art related and stuff, I'll give her little snippets of, did you know this? Just so she knows. And even though, she's not verbal, it's like, she's still receiving my information. So, if, again, with the anxiety aspect, if you don't know where to start at, locally is like your best option, I would suggest.
You said you're in Milwaukee?
Yes, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I didn't know that. I want to connect you with Dr. Baker. She's one of the authors in our book, but she was in our teaching last year, and she's in Milwaukee. I forget the name of the college she teaches in, but that's her. I think she's from there as well. It's a lot of things that Milwaukee is so interesting because of also the it's a lot of things that are not only race-based challenges, but also economic. And it's a lot of things that have been happening there recently around Black people activating for themselves, which it's been great for me to see. I had a fellowship there many years ago in the 90s, and it was just really heartbreaking for me to see the disparities between Black people and other people there in the city. And so the fact that you're homeschooling is so radical and revolutionary. And so I commend you on that, because I know that right now Milwaukee is going through a lot politically and economically. So looking, oh, George, I told you George knew he was going to come through with that Columbia piece. So as we wrap up, are there, I think I would ask all the panelists to give in 60 seconds. Is that too much? In 120, that's 2 minutes. 60 seconds or less. If you can give closing words that you would like to give of encouragement to the listeners regarding mitigating anxiety as they begin their homeschooling practice. And let's start with, is Michelle done turned off her camera. I'm going to unpin her. But if we can start with Amelia, go to Arden, Nichelle, and end with Mama Phyllis. Let's do that.
So I would like to say, the taking this step forward is just bravery in itself. Like you're giving us an opportunity to connect with you, and you connect with us. So I do appreciate that. Thank you for just being present in this space. And if I want to leave a lasting message for you all, is just continue doing what you're doing. There's no wrong way at all. There isn't. And if you have any questions, you have just so many people to ask from this panel, and from each other, from yourself. So I appreciate you being here.
Just saying, reiteration, thank you, Khadijah and Cheryl, for your work, your effort, your time. Thank you all for listening to us, and just repeating follow your intuition. Know that your homeschool situation, your household looks the way you need it to look. There are resources. Your community may not be physical, it might be virtual. But those of us in this space are working very hard to make sure that it's as connected as it could be.
I would say to free yourself from the word behind. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news talking about our students are behind, COVID has made people behind. There is no such thing as behind. If you create within your children a lifelong love of learning, they will never be behind. And I so appreciate this whole environment. I literally feel as if I have found my tribe, and I just appreciate this platform.
Absolutely.
Am I next? Okay. I just wanted to thank Drs. Cheryl and Dr. Khadijah. And I would say, as far as anxiety is concerned, or fear, those feelings are natural, and it's like you just have to keep going in spite of it, knowing that you have support, that there are people that you can reach out to online, or if it might be in person or whatever, but that you're not doing it alone, and that the rewards will be worth it when you come to the end of that journey. And so I would say keep moving forward and lean on your village, wherever it might be.
That's really good advice, everyone. And in 60 seconds, I say ditto. And I just say, trust yourself. If it's hard, know that that does not mean it's impossible. All of us have had challenges where there's been some struggle, but really center yourself in knowing intuitively that your child best, that your child being with you and in your presence is the best thing that they can experience. And if you're leading with love, then you cannot go wrong. And that is possible. That is the truth. And stamp, as the kids say, period with the T. That's the truth. And so I send blessings and positive energy your way as you begin this process. And I'm wishing you all the best.
Yes, and you are not alone.
So you want to close us out, Cheryl?
No, I'm just saying you have, you have this group and there's other groups and you're not alone. You have people with you. So that's a good thing.
Yes.
So we'd like to thank everybody for joining us for this 1.5-hour session, impromptu session. Look what we can do. We are magical, wonderful beings. What we can do when we come together, we create the magic, the best. We are the curriculum. That's what Queen Thais always says. I love that woman. And I love those words. We are the curriculum. So
Yeah.
please come back and join us at 5 p.m. for our closing session, our last session with Zadeka Terrell, using art and education. I'm butchering that title, but she is a fine artist. As we speak, she has at least 4 of her pieces in 4 different museums and galleries around the world. I know as far as San Francisco, I think one's in another country as well. But I'm hoping that she comes through with the session because she is a busy woman. But thank you so much for joining us, and please be sure to join us with the closing reception at 6 p.m. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Love you
Love you
too.
back.